How do you go from an idea to an infographic? Today, we're going behind the scenes with the Lemonly design team to show you exactly how it all comes together. Strap in, because we're getting behind the wheel of our beginner's guide to Formula One infographic. My name is Ella Olson, and I'm a content writer at Lemonly. We've created literally thousands of infographics, and we want to show you how it's done. As we go, we'll also provide a few pointers for anyone interested in designing infographics of their own. With that, let's get started. Before we dive into how we created this infographic, let's talk about why we created it. Lemonly designs sweet visual content for clients all around the world, but so far, none of them have asked us to create a beginner's guide to Formula One. This one's all our own. So why do we make our own infographics? Well, first of all, they're fun. The infographics and social media micro-content we produce for Lemonly, what we call editorial content, give us the chance to explore interesting topics, flex our creative chops, and try our hand at new design styles and trends. These pieces are also super shareable. We like to choose topics that already have a lot of buzz around them. Our goal is to grow our audience, start conversations, and drive engagement, whether that's on social media, our website, or organic search. Editorial content also gives us an excellent foundation for a divisible content strategy. Divisible content means repurposing assets into more pieces of content to reach your audience in more places. We're big believers in getting the most out of everything we create, and our editorial infographics serve as the basis for more micro-content, blogs, and even videos like this one. How do we decide what to make editorial content about? When we pick a topic for editorial content, we like to look at a few key qualities. First up, timeliness. What's trending? What's everyone searching for? Since we plan our content months ahead, we look for cultural moments we can jump on before they peak. With Formula One, we released our infographic right before Netflix dropped Season 6 of Drive to Survive, when interest was already spiking. The staying power of evergreen content is also valuable. We put a lot of effort into our editorial infographics, so we want topics with lasting interest and loyal fans. Formula One has a massive global fan base that's engaged all year long, and we continue to see interest in this topic with every new F1 season. That kind of staying power makes our investment worthwhile. Next, visual interest. We aim for topics that lend themselves to dynamic visuals that are fun for our designers to create and interesting for our audiences to look at. Formula One was an easy sell there. Sleek cars, bold racing uniforms, trophies, and unique circuits all offer exciting design opportunities. Complexity is another factor. We like to say that clarity is our superpower at Lemonly. We make things easier to understand through visual content. When we consider different topics for editorial infographics, we look for subjects that could benefit from some extra clarity, things that are tricky to understand or feel important to the public interest. Part of F1's appeal is its intricacies. The rules, races, teams, strategies, and drama surrounding the sport present a learning curve for newcomers. That's where we lean in to make sense of it all in a clear, engaging format. And finally, variety. We love to make infographics about all kinds of subjects: pop culture, sports, healthcare, history, lifestyle content, you name it. So when it's time to choose our next topic, we think about what we've covered recently and what new ideas we can explore. Formula One gave us the chance to branch out, appeal to a new audience, and still flex our creative muscles. So we've covered the why, let's get into the how. If you've seen our previous video on how to make an infographic, you can check that out here or in the description below. You know that every great infographic starts with strategy. At Lemonly, we kick off strategy by gathering our ingredients, basically a creative brief. The ingredients define our goal, audience, main idea, and key resources. Together, they make up the bones of the infographic and act as our North Star as we develop the piece. Let's start with our goal. We knew from the jump that we wanted to provide new fans of Formula One with a handy resource that explained the basics. When considering your content goals, it's helpful to be specific. What 1 to 2 things do you want people to learn? What should people do with their newly acquired knowledge? Digging just a bit deeper, we wanted people to learn what makes the cars so special and what a Formula One race really looks like, how the cars, teams, and drivers come together on race weekend and create one of the most exciting and popular sports in the world. Once people understood that, we wanted them to leave feeling excited to follow F1, and maybe even sign up for our newsletter if they wanted to see more sweet visuals. A good infographic has a definite audience in mind. Once we nailed down our goal, our audience became clear: Formula One beginners. Having a specific audience helped us determine what level of information would need to be included. For example, we knew we would have to define key terms that a more advanced audience would already know. On the flip side, we knew there would be some more advanced topics we could leave out for a beginner audience. Our first phase of research mostly involved understanding the nuts and bolts of Formula One. From there, we identified some key resources that we knew would be helpful as we crafted the outline and wrote the copy. The basic rules of research apply when we write infographics. We look for popular, credible sources with a named byline, like the official Formula One website, for instance. Once we rounded up our resources, it was time to start writing copy. Kind of. Good copy starts with a good outline. Whether I'm writing for Lemon.ly or one of our clients, I like to start by organizing my content. That includes laying out an introduction, conclusion, and a few key sections in between. I knew I needed to start with an introduction that explains the piece's purpose and end with a conclusion that drives it home. Pun always intended. From there, I needed to determine which main sections to include. I'll go back to the goal I wrote down earlier: to educate beginners and explain the basics of the cars, drivers, teams, and races that make F1 iconic. My core sections became pretty obvious at that point. I organized these into a logical flow and jotted down a few bullet points for what I knew I wanted to talk about in each section. It looked a little something like this. And with that, it was time to start writing. For real this time. As I write copy, I keep clarity and concision top of mind. For instance, the headings are intentionally simple here. Headings provide the audience with a clear hierarchy of information, so it's best not to overcomplicate things. I had a little more room to play with creative subheadings and call-out copy. Alliterative phrases and clever wordplay add personality to the piece and keep viewers engaged. Still, concision is the name of the game here. For an infographic, we generally keep to around 1.5 to 2 pages of written content. Short paragraphs and bulleted lists are your best friends for meeting that goal. One of the most important things to remember when you're writing an infographic is that the words won't be the only thing someone's looking at. In fact, your audience is probably going to spend more time looking at the things that aren't the words: the illustrations, diagrams, data visualizations, etc. All of the graphic in your infographic. And that's a good thing. The most important rule of writing is show, don't tell. Infographics are unique because the visuals carry so much of the meaning. They're not just there to decorate the text. That brings me to my next tip. When you have the opportunity to use an illustration, diagram, or chart to explain information, use it. Let's consider a Formula One car, for example. One of my goals with this infographic is to help people understand what makes an F1 car unique. Without visuals, I might be inclined to over-explain that the side pods of a Formula One car are located on either side of the vehicle, and that they house the radiators and cooling unit while also directing airflow around the car. But I don't need to write out all of this in detail. Instead, I can rely on the car illustration to show the location of the side pods and use concise bullet points to convey the information efficiently. When the first draft is done, it's time to bring in more eyes. Collaboration is a core value at Lemon.ly. It makes a huge difference in the connections between our team members and the quality of our content. Feedback from the team helps refine the tone and organization to make the piece even stronger and tighter. Now it's time for final copy edits. I implemented feedback, did a thorough proof and final fact check, then looked for any areas to punch up the copy with a sharp eye for opportunities to add some extra voice. That's always my last step in crafting copy, but it's one I tend to be careful about. Getting too fun or witty can get in the way of your audience's understanding of your content, so never sacrifice clarity for comedy. So we've got our infographic written, focused on our audience and goals, with some ideas for key visuals in mind. Now, we're ready to move into design. With that, I'll hand it over to Ty from our design team.
Hey, I'm Ty McConnell, and I'm a senior motion designer at Lemon.ly. I designed our Formula One infographic, and I'm going to take you through that process, starting with the wireframe and the Moodboard. I start by reading the final copy, even if I've read it before. As I read, I look for key points, illustration opportunities, and the number of sections I have to work with. That helps me understand how to structure the wireframe and what kinds of visuals I might use to communicate the information. Personally, I like to start with the Moodboard. That's a summary of key visual elements like colors, fonts, icons, and illustration style. The goal here is to set the overall creative direction for the piece. Starting with the Moodboard helps me feel inspired and gets me thinking about how I might create some of the key visuals, even if I'm not doing a full design draft just yet. I usually start by Googling inspiration related to the topic to find some fun aesthetics that I think will work. For this one, I was really inspired by the fonts from the Formula One website. I love techno and sci-fi feeling fonts, but I always have to be careful about balance. Leaning too hard into futuristic fonts can make the piece feel difficult to read, and as always, clarity is the most important part of the infographic. Ultimately, I chose Magistral for the title and heading font, and Hyperspace Race Regular for subheadings. These are both great for readability while also maintaining that high-speed motorsport feel. For colors, my first thought was a retrowave-inspired mix of purples, pinks, and blues. After doing some more digging though, I decided to go in a different direction with more of a sporty racing vibe. In the end, I married the Formula One palette with Lemonly's. I incorporated pops of red to reference F1, and then introduced some lighter Lemonly teal gradients to light the scenes and add contrast. The visual style for this one was super fun to develop. I was inspired by the ultra high-tech vehicles, so I looked for illustration examples that felt cutting edge and powerful. I also noticed that F1 features grid patterns in a few places, like the checkered flag and vehicle schematics. So I incorporated a similar pattern that runs throughout the piece. Maybe most importantly, I wanted the visual style to convey speed. There are a few ways designers can go about evoking motion and momentum in a static piece. I chose to incorporate angled shapes and speed lines in the headers using gradients, which are also reflected in the Moodboard. Then, it was time to wireframe. The wireframe is a simplified blueprint of your infographic, showing the text, layout, and notes with planned visual elements. I first created sections according to the headings: cars, drivers, teams, and races. From there, I mapped out LS copy and arranged paragraphs in bulleted lists, thinking through the layout, spacing, and key visuals for each section. The driver section presented a unique challenge on this one. We wanted this section to be pretty information dense, with a few details about some of Formula One's top drivers. Using a trading card layout helped us accomplish that, and I developed a key and some icons to convey information instead of text, keeping all the information while also making the section feel really visual rather than text heavy. If you're interested in making infographics of your own, we've got a few more tips for wireframing. When you see bullet points in infographic copy, they're usually a good sign that you're going to be creating some icons. For this piece, I had bullets for each driver's stats and the race weekend schedule. I noted these in the wireframe, then brought them to life in the design phase. I know illustrations are in store whenever I see a larger chunk of text. Paragraphs aren't usually super effective in an infographic, so I often try to offset them with a larger illustration. This piece didn't have many multi-line blocks of text, but I knew I would want the introduction and conclusion to be especially dynamic here. I spent some extra time on the hero illustration in the wireframe to make sure I had a rock-solid foundation for the defining graphic in the piece. Here's a look at the final wireframe. You can see the copy and the major visuals are all laid out. Now it's time for the fun part, design. At Lemonly, we like to say that in the design phase, we paint the Moodboard onto the wireframe. That means we take all of the colors, fonts, and illustrations we established in the Moodboard phase and apply them to the layout we defined in the wireframe. I want to show you a closer look at one of the key visuals in this infographic and how it came together. The car shows up a few times throughout the piece, so it was important to get it right. Now cars, believe it or not, are a pretty big deal in F1. That meant I had no shortage of resources and pictures to go off of when creating the illustration. I started with a 3D model of an F1 car and found some angles that I could work with in Blender. I used Blender to get a free rotating view of all the car angles using the 3D model I found online. This skewed orthographic view of the car helped give the hero illustration depth, and I used the same model to create the diagram of the car in the next section. From there, I brought the piece to Adobe Illustrator to start blocking out a few simple shapes in our vector style. In the first round of design, we had a showroom illustration at the top of the piece, and the car itself was darker and had more gray tints than blues. Once I had the whole piece in front of me, I realized we had a chance to make this hero illustration more interesting and more true to the sport. I swapped the showroom for a crowd scene, which brought the illustration to life and made the top of the piece feel more dramatic. I also updated some of the colors and gradients to add contrast and make some of the details pop. Just like during the content phase, we went through a couple of rounds of internal feedback to make the design the best that it can be. Getting feedback from other designers helped me find ways to finesse the design or explore a different illustration style, and our content writers help proof for typos and make sure the visuals and copy are working well together. And there we have it, our finished beginner's guide to Formula One infographic. The final piece has a lot of unique designs and illustrations that you can dig into. Here, we used a schematic diagram to show the anatomy of an F1 car. We also have our driver's trading cards, a unit chart that highlights 3 of the best teams in recent years, and a list of all the countries around the world where Formula One races take place. At the very end, we cross the finish line with a head-on illustration of an F1 car as it races through a cityscape. You can see the full piece in all its glory by clicking the link in the description.
With the infographic done, it's time to publish and share it with the world, just in time for the start of the F1 season and the new episodes of Drive to Survive. To promote the infographic, we used a mix of organic and paid media, including social, email, and native ads. We used micro-content pulled from the infographic, along with 2 additional pieces we created about related topics not included in the infographic: what Formula One flags mean and how pit stops have become significantly faster over time. That's divisible content in action. All these pieces work together to reach our audience and drive engagement with our infographic. And since this content is evergreen, Formula One beginners and fans continue to find our content every season. That's great for our brand and great for racing fans looking for great content about their favorite sport. We hope you enjoyed this walkthrough of how we create infographics and maybe even picked up a few tips along the way. Be sure to subscribe if you want to keep up with the Lemon Lee team, and check out our website for more sweet visual content. Catch you next time.